Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming here to Jackstraw Cultural Center or to our Facebook or YouTube feeds. Glad to have you here for Artist Talk with Wei Yang and Murphy Janssen for our new media gallery. First, I want to start by saying that today we meet on the lands of the Duwamish, Suquamish, and Muckleshoot nations and other Coast Salish peoples, past and present. The staff, board, and artists of Jackstraw acknowledge that we're living, creating, working, and playing on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle and the Salish Sea, and we honor them and the land itself with deep gratitude. Thank you for being here with us. Really, always a pleasure to have artists from DX Arts and all of the wonderful artists that we have here in our gallery program. I want to mention applications for the next year of our gallery program are open until November 27th. You don't have to be a PhD to apply for the program. You can be doing any kind of art that involves or could involve creating an installation that has sound as an element, and that can look and sound like a lot of different things. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, drop us a line, arts@jackstraw.org. Visit our website, jackstraw.org. It has all kinds of details and FAQs, and my job is to help you have a successful application. So however I can help within reason, I'm happy to. So it's November 27th. And we also have our artist support program deadline the same day, and that's for any kind of project that involves sound. It could be a musician creating an album, it could be a writer creating an audiobook, an artist creating a soundscape, all kinds of things, podcasts, radio programs, radio plays, anything that makes sound and might use a studio. So again, drop us a line or give us a call if you have questions about that. We have some events coming up in relation to this exhibit. They've been doing performances every third Monday-ish, Monday evenings in the gallery. November 20th and December 4th. Thank you, December 4th. And those dates are on our website, jackstraw.org. We actually have a little events calendar there. It's pretty handy. So those evenings, and then there's a youth and family workshop. It's free. It's part of our series of workshops that are accessible for blind and visually impaired youth, but they're also open to anyone. And it should be really cool. I'm looking forward to seeing what they cook up. Just having seen kids wailing on the drum kit in the installation anyway, I think it's bound to be a good time.
Cool.
I also want to say thanks to our funders. These residency programs get support from City of Seattle Office of Arts and Culture, For Culture, Arts WA, the National Endowment for the Arts, the Rainier Foundation, the Epstein Foundation, and Arts Fund, and also individual contributors. And we appreciate all of those individual contributions, however people send them. So thanks for that. And thanks to our wonderful technical staff tonight, Aisha and Daniel. And with that, I will stop talking and hand it over to Wei and Murphy. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks, Levi.
Thank you. All right. Thanks for being here tonight. My name is Wei and Murphy here. And we're the authors of the exhibit you have seen or will be seeing, hopefully, on your way out. So the piece is entitled "Now You're Here When This Happened." And tonight, for the talk, I would like to start with some background information on previous collaborations we have done that led to this project. And after that, I will talk about the current installation, and Murphy will comment on the project from a more performative point of view. At the end, we can have some time for discussion, but feel free to interrupt anytime if you have any question. All right. Okay. So the first project we did was in 2021, and the title for that was Symbalion. It's a made-up word that encompasses both symbol, as a symbol in the drums, and symbiont, referring to an organism living in a symbiosis with each other. The piece has many identities. It was Murphy's master thesis, and it was my output for a course, for the mechatronic course I was taking at DXR at the time, taught by the wonderful Afroditi Passara. Thematically, it was about the idea of Anthropocene, which was a term describing the geological age when human activity has become the dominant actor responsible for ecological and environmental change. So under this vast scope of the topic, we were focusing on the idea of deep time, which was a concept expressing the parallelism of various notions of time in different scales, such as planetary time, biological time from various species, and behavioral time and informational time. You can think about the data collection and data dissemination, so the time it would take. And so at the end, we came up with a feedback system where we installed light sensors on two plants. And Murphy were playing, improvising, and because drum set is such a gestural instrument, so there were lights behind him, and then his gesture was filtering the light that passing through and arrive on the light sensors. So so the data arrived at light sensor are changing in real time, and so those data changing the music that was being generated, which in turn influence how he plays. So it's like a feedback loop. So they were influencing each other, helping each other to achieve a performance, and therefore forming a symbiotic relation with light sensors and gestures and sound as means of communication. So the keyword for this project would be feedback loop system, and then time. You have anything to?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was just our first experiment with creating what you'll go on to talk about were these kind of systems of feedback loops and systems of kind of working with not only either a plant in this case or a light source, but then also as a performer working with myself in real time or a version of myself because of how I've affected either the music or the lights behind me in Symbolion. And so that was kind of as kind of the performer in the environment, kind of the first time that I've ever experienced having feedback from a non-human entity. Like usually I'm on a bandstand with other musicians, or really every other time. It's whether it's in a band or in kind of an improvised setting, always other musicians, and which is very fun in itself. But this was a whole different experience to kind of exist within a feedback loop that is more ethereal or kind of coming from everywhere, or only coming from myself too. And
and I guess the idea that you need to be aware of, what you do will impact the how the plant will react, and and the reason why we chose light was because it's a metaphor of the photosynthesis. So that was so that was the project. It was a first project we did, and by the way, all these projects that we'll be talking about would be available on my website if you're interested. There will be more documentation there as well. Okay, so for that project, I myself, I was still in the loop. Because I was interfering at various points to moderate the sound for the purpose of making the sounding outcome more interesting. So after the project, I was thinking it might be a good idea, or might be good to try to just let go and see what kind of outcome can come out, and have some kind of more autonomous system for the player to interact with. And so that thought led to the second project between us. Essentially, for that project, we came up with another performance system that was equipped with a machine listening algorithm. So the computer would take in the input of what Murphy was doing and react to it, and then output certain audio, and which again in turn influence your play. So it's another feedback loop. And I mean, I was saying it's more autonomous, but it's not entirely autonomous because we did make several decisions. So, for example, we decide how many microphones we're going to use and where to place them, and then what kind of data they should be listening for, and how to map these data into different algorithms in the audio signal processing chain to produce the sonic reaction. And when we did the performance, we decided to well, for the performance purpose, we did sort of compose the form and then imposed a structure. So, for example, how it would start, and maybe at some point it would go to certain context, and then how it would end. And so, in musician world, it's called the structure improvisation. So that's pretty much what we did for the performance. But it's regardless, it's different from the first one because I wasn't hovering over the entire process, and the outcome gave some nice surprise, which would be very difficult for me to compose in detail. And then there was actually some room for some theatrical elements as well, which was a huge part in that work. Thematically, it was about time again, or rather the manifestation of time, which is the memory. More specifically, the reconstructive aspects of memory. I'm sure you all have this experience when you try to recall something or someone from the past. Bits and parts are clear, but the rest kind of remain just vague, and you have to fill in the details. So the process of filling in is context dependent, and sometimes draw from the general knowledge that's somewhere stored in the mind already, or sometimes it draws from a specific experience, but from another event, not from that specific event. So by practicing this act of filling in the details, we are not actually faithfully reproducing it, the memory or the past events. Instead, we are constantly doing the fabrication and fabulation, which for me it's rather poetic, and it's a creative process. And so for that project, we decided to call it "If I Keep Recalling It, Something Had to Change." So that's the kind of capture the essential idea that we want to convey. The whole piece was structured around it's a process of Murphy was trying to recall a specific improvisation that he did a long time ago. And so he was trying to recall it, and of course that he has to fill in the process, the details. And so the computer, the machine listening algorithm was listening for what Murphy was doing, and then sliced the original improvisation recording in real time, and then they were processed. So sometimes they come back in a more faithful way, albeit fragmented, but sometimes they are entirely processed that it's beyond recognized. So Murphy, when performed the project, the piece, he had to, sometimes get help from the past, but sometimes the past is obscure the process, and so you have to make the active feeding in action, and it's also worth pointing out the. So if you've been to the installation already, the recording, that's the recording from that performance. So that carry over to this one.
Yeah, I mean, what was fun about that piece specifically, and kind of our work together thus far since 2021 and my time at UW in grad school was each of these three pieces, from Symboliant to Recalling to this, all have really built off each other, and not only built off each other, but heavily influenced what was to come, or we're building on it, but expanding it or diving deeper into the ideas. And so where Symbolion was, there was improvisation. There was freedom that I had as kind of the point of it, to be improvising with this plant matter and these lights. This piece allowed for kind of a deeper improvisation in these kind of suites or these movements of this song, even though the whole point of it was to kind of play with a memory that I had created before. And what I found really interesting specifically that I think we had fun with in that piece was, if I'm remembering, the piece that we used for the improvisation for Recall was some improvisations that I had sent you when we first met.
Yep.
Yeah. When we first kind of were proposing my master's thesis and Wei's class project, I had reached out to some professors that I was working with at the School of Music, and you had been talking with, I think, Richard at the time, or obviously had been working alongside of him in the program. And when our some mentors and professors of ours kind of caught wind of what we were trying to do, they said, well, you guys should at least meet each other and see what's going on. And so we kind of had a musical meeting as well of like,
You sent me the recording.
yeah, like you said, you know, shoot me some free stuff of yours that you got going on. And so I took some just recordings of mine and sent them to you to kind of say, you know, this is what I sound like, this is what I like to play, which fortunately enough you enjoyed, and we could work together. But so we actually used some of those really early improvisations of mine for this second piece now.
Yeah.
So it was like at least over a year old of just, I think, a phone recording kind of in my bedroom. And so a pretty, you know, far back memory of
Which I don't think you remember.
No,
exactly
it was just me going into my bedroom at the time because of we were in lockdown and things like that. It was me going into our second room and just playing for free for 5 minutes and trying to be in the present moment of that improvisation. Shot it off to Wei, and you know, and now it's being brought back. It's cool that you kept that, but was being brought back in this piece. And so a goal of it was, or kind of a limitation that we placed on that for my playing was, attend to this recording. You know, I didn't have to. I wasn't saying to myself like, oh, you have to play what this recording is, but it was very much based on this early improvisation, and listen to it, play with it, have it affect what I was doing, but then expand on it and let it influence some decision making that you have. And so that was really fun. There was still these limitations that we were placing on kind of the general piece, but there was a lot more freedom in that compared to, I think, the first one too. And I think, like you said, you were even a little more hands off with this second piece too, which I don't know. I think it's kind of in a way similar to me having more freedom on the drum kit in the piece, even though it's different. You're not forced to play a role of. In that first piece, I always kind of found it akin to kind of playing God in that first piece, you know, like choosing the sound or pushing the button for now. We're going to do this, and now we're going to go here. Yeah. This second piece seemed a little more free in that way, where you kind of set it up and then let it go.
Yeah, and I guess the elephant in the room is the improvisation as well, right?
Yeah.
Because improvisation is never starting something from scratch. It's always you store those little riffs or whatever you have in the back of your mind already, and then the context induce it, so it bring it out and then perform it. So and so that's kind of the overall coherent aspects of it as well.
Totally.
Yeah. So I guess you start talking about it. So the current project, which is titled "Now You Are Here When This Happened," as the title suggests, it deals again with time and memory, and which is an extension from previous two projects, both thematically and technically. There are several components in this project: the audio, the visual, and the interactivity as well. And the way they are implemented are informed and inspired by various model of memory that I've been reading when I was working on this project. So the theories and models of memory are not always clearly mapped to, this map to that and that map to that. They are not always directly translatable, but they were kind of lingering at the back of my hand when I was working on this and making decisions at different points. So the first type of memory model is the episodic memory versus the semantic memory. So episodic memory is about memory where you have a very specific recall to an event. So it's like an episode in the past, and you recall it. And the semantic memory is more about you understand. It's similar to general knowledge. So you understand some idea and you abstract it, and then that become your knowledge, and that's the when it's in the memory domain, it's the semantic memory. So when you walk into the show, the exhibition, the most obvious element is a recording again of yours playing of the second project that we talked about being projected onto a screen. This is a very specific event, and so that's a representation of episodic memory, especially for people who were there when this performance took place. So you were there, and Joe were there, and then Kyle, maybe you were there. Yeah. Despite this, because the performance was a while ago, and also due to the nature being an improvisation, I think it's safe to assume that even for those who are there, don't remember exactly what happens. And at least that's the case for me, and I assume it's the same for you.
Very much so.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but what it does is that even we weren't there when the particular performance actually happened, the video that's being played there points to specific context. In this case, it's a performance context. It's a musical performance, and because of that, it encouraged certain retrieval of certain sets of knowledge, and set up certain expectation that's usually associated with the performance context. So I see this, so when you walk into it, it's not just anything can happen. It set up a specific invitation for you to retrieve, what knowledge you might have in terms of performance before, and because everyone have different association with performance, and so I treat having the video there as an invitation for bringing out those associations. Okay, so another type of memory that I found interesting was the tripart constructs of the sensory memory, short-term memory, and long-term memory. So they're not necessarily organized in a very linear manner. They always intermingle with each other at different stage. I was particularly drawn to the sensory memory, which takes place in the initial memory encoding stage. There have been studies made to show that the phonological information is crucial for memory encoding, as well as for recalling that memory at a later time. So for example, if you witness something happen, and if that event was accompanied by salient sounds, then you're more likely going to remember it than later, than when you witness it happen without a sound component. Yeah. So that's the difference of the phonological information doing it. So to explore this idea, we try two things. One is to because we want to make a sound salient, and so in the future you better remember this experience. So one of the two things we do. The first thing is to superimpose sounds of different spatial information. So we have Murphy's playing, which is recorded in a large auditorium. So it's very it has a sense of spaciousness, and on top of that, there's a breathing sound. I don't know if you heard it, but it's someone breathing very regularly, and so it is much more intimate space in there. And there's also this when it gets really quiet, you should be able to hear this very dry kind of click sound, and it's because it's so dry, it sounds almost like right next to you or behind you. And so by putting all these sounds together, we were hoping that the spatial discrepancy between among the three would be salient enough so that memory encoding happens effectively. Another thing we decided was to scatter different instruments across the room. There's the drum set, but there's also some small percussions. Some of them are just on the ground, and some of them are suspended. So visually speaking, the drum sets, the percussion are the remnants of what was in the video. So it helped again setting up the context. But another reason why we did that is that so when you walk in there, it would be difficult to move around without making any sound. And so, so again, we're hoping you make some sound, and then associate the sound with what you're looking at, and what you're feeling. So you remember this experience better. Another visual component is the particle system. So up to this point, the video playback and the sound and the staging of instruments, they are more or less kind of static, and they don't really modulate, right? I mean, the suspended instrument can move around a little bit, but they're quite concrete. I treat the particle system as the more mobile version of these more static components. And so what it does, so it should be able to do what the other things are doing, but in a more dynamic way. And that was the idea. And I also I watched a movie. Well, it's called After Young, the same as my last name. It's kind of strange, but it was about like remembering of like death, and then like things might happen before, and then one of the scene is like different memories. So Young in the movie is actually android. So after the android died, and the owner was trying to retrieve the memory of what the android seen. The android was the nanny, and so yeah. So and anyway, it was very poetic. And there was a scene where different memories are saved into different nodes, and then there's always when they show it's traversing from one node to another, it's always this like particle system as transition, which I like it really much visually, but I also like the idea of memory is something like it's like a old dusty book you put in the back of a bookshelf, and when you retrieve it, you dedust it.
Yeah.
And so there's that. I mean that's so there's that. But also it connects the visual to the audio as well. So the particles. So when you move around, the particle initially they were said to be repelled, So if you move to a certain place, the particle would be pushed away by you. But I experimented with it, and I changed it to attract. So right now, if you walk through it, the particle kind of follow you, and then eventually cluster in the center of you. Um, so so these attraction are happening in real time, and depending on the number of particles that are moving and the velocity, the general velocity of the particles, um, certain sounds are triggered by these two parameters, and the sound was added to the existing sound world. And another reason I use the particle system is I want to provide the opportunity to for someone visiting it to be able to rewrite the memory in a very I mean, you can choose to sit back and then just observe what's happening, but you can also jump in and then move a lot, and then making all the sounds that cover all the original information. But while you're doing that, you're also making your own new memory as well. And so I that was the reason why we decided to use the particle system. And I mean, again, it's from the most outsets, it's the interactive part. So I think that works at different levels, at least according to our plan. And one more thing in the video component was there's a video delay line. So they don't always show at the same time, at the same strength, but at some point you will see like different versions of you. So there's a version of you're kind of in a orange wireframe mesh. And there's another version, like when you get closer, there's like a ghosted version of you that becomes more visible, but as you go back, it becomes less visible. But when you become visible, there is another version of you that kind of show what you were doing about like dynamically. It's about like 5 to 10 seconds ago. Depends on how loud you are. You're making the entire sound world. If you're loud, then the memory is not so long ago. But so at some point you should be able to see like 3 versions of you, and then I was doing the tests, and it was quite interesting because I was noticing I was starting to interact the ghost image of myself about like 3 or 5 seconds ago, and then at some point, it was my ghost image was like trying to looks like he's hitting the sound, but it's not making any sound. So I was like, what's happening? And so there's like a little conversation between different versions of you. So and the effects got multiplied when there are more people in there. So that become quite dreamlike, I would say. Yeah. And so yeah.
This latest version of kind of our work together, I think, and especially for me, has been the most freeing of all 3. We've done a couple performances specifically now that are kind of happenings, as we're calling them, throughout this installation, in which we've kind of devoted an hour to be together with whoever comes to be in the room, which is definitely the longest we've attempted, I think, to kind of improvise in a piece together. And both times that we've held those specific instances, that hour has just effortlessly gone by. And it's being in that room um, is really just kind of forever stimulating and inspiring. Now this time playing with like a visual memory of myself compared to the second in recalling, it was just an audio version of a past self of me, and now this
Yeah.
is a video version of a past self of me, plus all these other echoes of even my present self with this kind of ghost system that we've created on the video is can really just kind of get lost in either what I did a year and a half ago in February on the video and those sounds, or what the person did next to me 10 seconds ago and kind of their
Yeah, and
effect of it. Yeah.
I guess that's another big difference from previous ones. So the first one, it's you and plants, right?
Yep.
Mostly you, and the second one is again you and computer, but it's again you. This one is much more communal, right? Because
Yeah.
people are invited to. I mean, sometimes we don't even invite. It just they automatically would play. Again, it's really difficult to not make any sound if you try to walk in there.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of kind of learning each other,
Yeah.
like through but there's learning to each other is happening right now, but I also see again they are seeing the visual parts, but they're also hearing the audio parts as well. So there's a lot of I guess collaboration from different different perspective. Yeah.
I think too in this one, in this version, because we have a video, but more than just what the video on the wall is doing, we have what's the piece of equipment that maps the room?
The sensor?
Yeah, the sensor that's mapping the room, along with the 4 microphones. Like even standing still and being quiet now has an effect on your surrounding, which as a drummer specifically, silence was not really ever my forte. And so learning how being quiet or being solemn or being stationary or being or kind of letting others do things around me, and that my kind of silence or stillness can actually affect those around me, maybe even more so than being loud or boisterous or whatever. That's been
and
really
and even
interesting and profound.
even if like you're quiet in the moving, but based on where you are, because they're like different zones.
Yeah.
And so even you're not moving in this zone, the outcome would be different from another zone. And actually, I didn't design this because it's rather difficult to think about it.
Yeah.
But it kind of turned out that way because you have different kind of combination, different factors at different zones, so which translated to different outcome. And so I thought that was unexpected, but it's a nice surprise, and it just manifested so differently when you're just in there by yourself, not doing anything, going all the way to many people in there and then doing all crazy things.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of things, a lot of points within the scale that so it's it's rather dynamic. That's I'm trying to say. And again, the dynamicism, it wasn't planned, but I'm glad it turned out that way.
Yeah.
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 It's been really fun.
Yeah. Should we ask if anyone has question?
Yeah.
I have a comment that I've had in my mind reading what you put out there for information. So there's a video I saw of an elderly woman who was a dancer in her time, and she, dementia, Alzheimer's, had lost a lot of her capabilities, and when they would play, for example, her Swan Lake music that she performed, she could come to and she would perform. I don't know if you've seen that video of
Or versions of it. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
And I wondered if you could, if we had the capability to give a visual to what she's experiencing. She's not experiencing what we're experiencing watching her.
Right.
Right.
She's experiencing a completely different time
Yeah.
conceptually,
Right. Yeah.
and we're experiencing her experience.
Right.
So we're experiencing what she's experiencing, but a different time.
Right. Yeah, it's like a filter, right?
Yeah.
We always reduce the outcome of it a little bit, and also what she's experiencing is a very private thing, right? Even let's say even when she didn't have Alzheimer and all that, just by the nature of the memory is so elusive, and so there has been some. I read some studies that it's like people won't be able to perform certain task, and then they were induced to similar type of context, and suddenly they were able to retrieve the memory. So that's the idea of the accessibility and the availability of the memory, and it's that's why it's so poetic, and but on the other hand, it's kind of great that memory is so private, because I think the inability of describing it, to reproduce it, it forces us, for example, if we're going to converse about the same event happen on the performance, I will give probably very different accounts from what you would give, right? So I think it was this gap make it rather beautiful, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and we've even, having hosted a couple of these happenings so far, I feel we've experienced that, in the following 10, 15 minutes after we're in there for an hour with a group. Because for most of the time when we've been in there, the group that we've had in there isn't, there's not a lot of talking. There's not a lot of communication through words. It's a dark room, but you catch each other's eyes, you play with each other, you move around each other. There's noise, there's music, there's sound, but there isn't a lot of talking and communication through talking. So you have this whole experience together, and then afterwards we kind of leave the room, and it's been interesting at that point kind of talking with everybody about what just happened, and it's hard. It's actually, I find it quite difficult sometimes to talk about the hour that we just had together. Words don't really come readily, but everybody seems excited, or at least so far has been excited, and you kind of want to talk to each other and share how fun that was, or in some cases how much that meant, or oh, do you remember that we kind of did that thing together, that was so cool. But it's difficult to describe
Yeah.
what it was, other than kind of just being happy, grateful, and
Yeah.
excited to have been a part of it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's, we'll kind of keep making those memories, I guess, and see how that continues to go. It's been really interesting so far.
Yeah.
I have a question / comment.
Yeah.
On this concept of memory, I've read things that certain people have memories in first person, and certain people have memories in third person. And
Okay.
depending on how your brain works, people experience memories in these different formats. So I find it very fascinating that in there you are playing with both, especially you on the screen.
Yeah.
And being in the room, and then this delay of yourself showing up on the screen. You almost have like many different versions of yourself and then your memory all in one room. So I don't know if you took that into account when you were like creating this installation, but I find that very fascinating.
Yeah, so I think initially when I was trying to design the system, I was trying to remove myself, right? And so at that point, I was trying to make it more objectively, or like subjective for other people who experience it. But later, I think when I was experiencing it, when I was working around, do some testing in there, and I found myself not doing the testing and just messing around,
Just playing.
just playing. And so there's and suddenly I realized that kind of, and when you do that, there's very subjective feeling about how things should go, and so I think at that point I realized there's a lot of potential, at least a lot of enjoyment from personal point of view if I switch from the objective to subjective, and then so it wasn't there from the very beginning, but it was there added later, and I'm glad that happened. Yeah.
Do you remember things do you know if you remember things in first or third person?
Yeah, I mean, Kyle
Personally? Yeah.
can attest it, but I often have conversation with myself.
Yeah.
I would say, yeah, but wait, if you do this. But then I would say, well, wait, don't do that. And then I was like, yeah, but I want to do this and all that. And
That's wonderful.
and then sometimes, it's kind of difficult to describe that,
Sure.
because it's very difficult to keep the identity consistent, right? You cannot just switch to first person, third person, and keep in consistent manner. And so after the conversation going for a while, it's it's me at the end. But
Yeah,
it's,
totally.
yeah. But I do find that kind of self-talking very very interesting, and it's another and when we do the self-talk, it's quite often like you're proposing like alternatives, right? And alternatives usually comes out from you remember experience from other things,
Sure.
and so that's quite enjoyable.
Yeah, I think I'm like in just my alone time or personal life, I don't interact with myself that way.
Okay,
So
well.
being in this room, but my wife, Lo, I think does. I don't know. I think you have conversations with yourself like that. I don't. And so being in this room with a version of myself, a memory of myself, interacting with it, making decisions because of what he is doing, deciding to go along with it, deciding to go against it, deciding to allow it to be present, deciding to override it and
Right.
kind of squash it in a way, do my own thing, is a little foreign, but also very exhilarating, and then also like in the kind of the communal way, seeing others in the room do it, like interact and kind of do what I'm doing, but with a former version of myself is
But when you
Yeah.
play drum, you
Yeah.
don't always think about it like linearly, right? You
No.
like I imagine sometimes you would think that, you know, I'm going to play the hi hat right now, but wait,
Yeah.
there's another person, another me playing the
Yeah.
bass drum. What will
Yeah.
happen? And so you know you end up doing both, and so
Yeah.
that's kind of like a similar
sure.
process as well, the multiphonic type of thing.
Yeah, but I think I mean, having a piece like this and kind of having worked with you to establish it has and continues to kind of give me new ways to think about sound creation and composition and improvising and all that kind of stuff. It's great.
Yeah,
I'm enjoying it.
maybe next time we should include smell as well.
Okay, I'm in. And get all five senses wrapped up in it. All right, that's the next frontier.
Yeah.
One more question. Do you think there's like an intuitive element to what both of you are doing? And I think intuition can also be tied to memory and experiences, but also very rooted in improvisation too. So
Sure.
was that coming up for you both when you were doing your different pieces?
Yeah, I would say yeah. I mean, I don't want to maybe give, in some ways, a ton of this away, but I think the way that this piece came about even was an intuitive move that sparked from you and that we just like followed with.
Yeah, I mean, we always, I think intuitive is, unless you like intuitively always try to do something different, then intuitive is kind of there's always this comfort zone in there, right?
Sure.
But when you do something, it's not always about staying in the comfort zone. You always might do something. I think if you're like conscious about it, then you would try to not stay in the comfort zone. And so it's always like a combination of, intuitive and then intuition, and then what you can do about it. And a lot of the intuition, they come from the, we talk about the sensory memory, short-term memory, long-term. Like when certain knowledge has been stored into the long-term memory. For example, I say, cat. I don't remember when I learned the word cat, but it's there, and so a lot of this intuition they are just like long term memory that came out itself. Yeah. So So I think it's very difficult to be. I think you really need to fight it in order to be entirely not intuitive or like try to be entirely intuitive. Yeah.
I think on that idea of the kind of long-term memory and in this room of an encouraged kind of improvisation, and you kind of spoke to this earlier, that I feel like the ability to kind of improvise in that room, you're leaning on a lot of long-term, probably long-term memory. Short-term memory, I can kind of memorize what we wrote here and kind of relay it, but to kind of improvise how we speak to each other or how I'm going to play something, to truly kind of create something in the moment, I'm really kind of relying on some longer term memory stuff, things that I've worked on for years in the past, or have listened to a lot and kind of internalized and memorized, but that's existing in the background and just kind of coming out in a moment. But it's not, or maybe it's in a new, the context is what makes it new and exciting, but it's probably something that I've learned or stored a long time ago.
Yeah.
It's not completely and utterly undone, never been done before or anything like that. It's
Yeah, and I would argue that we have tendencies, but you know, you might make certain decision at some context and thinking it's intuition, but you know, I don't think intuition is like a static entity there.
Yeah.
And then every time something happens, you always reach in to grab something out. I think your intuition will modify based on the context as well.
Yeah, I mean, or having been able to play with myself on the screen, my tendencies are like very apparent. Like I'll like step into that room or something and we'll start to play or improvise. Something's happening on the screen, and I'll do something that I think is new and exciting and in the moment, and then it like plays on the video. And I'm like, oh, I did that. That's like something that I guess fall back on, or that's part of maybe it's part of my sound or something as a musician, but it's probably also something that I rely on. And I did it a year and a half ago, or in February of 2022, and here I am, you know, trying to do something new and cool, and I'm these tendencies are coming about. Yeah, that's been interesting to realize. Sometimes, not always the most demoralizing thing, but sometimes like, oh shoot, okay, all right, let's do something fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a quick question.
Sure.
I'm wondering if you can talk about the design of the room at all, and how you wanted to invite people who maybe performance-wise, when you think of performance, you think very much like, okay, performer, audience, and so pulling the audience through, whether it was putting instruments that were maybe a little bit more accessible, sort of on the outskirts, or talking about some of the zones that you mentioned, because it's definitely a move to like go right in the room, grab a stick, and go right to the kit in the center. So I'm wondering if you can talk about how you conceptualize that to get the invitation really, in there for strangers.
So it's not a quick question.
Long question.
Well, I think if I can give maybe a quick start to it with just talking about the drums. So the video, obviously, my primary instrument is a percussion and drum set. The video that we've chosen for this project is me on a drum kit. And so contextually, it kind of made sense to have drums in the room. That being said, in terms of inviting a public in, whether they are musicians, non-musicians, children, veteran adults, or even in old age, having something that can be struck or shaken or tapped and it create resonance in the room seemed to me like a very inviting piece, instead of, say, a saxophone or some kind of trained instrument.
So percussion definitely help with that, but there's also different levels of immediacy in there, right? So if you go in there, it's rather low cost to just interact with a particle, right? So that already like gets you started. and then then when you're interacting with it, you need to be staying in a certain zone, and then so suddenly you realize that instrument suspended behind above you. So it's not a low cost thing to do the next step, reach out and then do a little shaking, right? And then that would generate some sound from the computer. And so that might encourage you to do the next step as well. So there is, different levels of encouragement in there. Yeah.
And reward too. It sounds
Yeah.
like you're kind of giving little breadcrumbs
Yeah.
to invite somebody as far along the path as they want to go, to really be interacting with the entire space, or
Right.
or maybe playing a drum solo along with the room and the person in the clip.
Yeah, and I also see not playing is a way of that interaction as well. Because a lot of my favorite moment playing with others is that suddenly everyone decide not to play and just lean against the wall, and then listening to the breathing and then all the clicky sounds that's really close to you. So if we decide to leave space for that, then that's an interaction as well. And suddenly we can start looking at what Murphy is doing in the screen, and then if we decide to change the strategy of interaction, then we can do it again. Yeah. So I guess that it's not always compelled to play. Yeah, but the system's there, so you can play. But if you don't feel compelled to play, I think that's also very legit, and you can just entirely different experience. And same thing can be applied to, same thing can be said to, when you're there by yourself, and when you're there with a group of people, and it would be very different. Yeah. But I think regardless which one, you get something that's unique, and hopefully it's good. Yeah.
Or memorable, at least.
Yeah.
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 What would you say one most aha moment through this installation for each of you?
Well, for me, it's
Yeah.
like bunch of aha, and then 2 days later, aha, and so it just keep going, and then and later when I go back to previous aha, this is a bad idea, so I might not do it. But so it's always like the newest edition is like, aha, I should add this. Yeah.
I think a small but really fun moment, but it's very specific, was, I think, the first performance that we had. There's one of the hanging instruments in the room is a little cymbal that all the hanging instruments are on just fish wire, so when you push them or play them, they swing quite a bit, and it's dark. And so there was one moment where I had a stick, and my goal was to play this cymbal, or that's kind of this area of the room that I was in. But it was moving around, and it was dark, and I was kind of also enjoying watching the particles on the video. And so I was playing the cymbal, but I was paying attention to other things, and for like a number of successive hits that I went to make, I whiffed the cymbal completely. So I just kind of made a motion of hitting, and even that,
Yeah.
while not having any cymbal sound, any crash sound, affected the room, affected the space, affected my, and I just I just started, after a couple times I just started laughing, and I was having a total moment of enjoyment for just and it made it it made it really fun, and that was. But yeah, that was
Yeah. So I mentioned about like different version of yourself,
yeah.
but so some of them are actually placed in like a mirror position. So if you base your visual information by looking at the mirror version of yourself, you know, there would be
Yep.
some surprise. So, for example, you think the symbol is here, you hit it, but it's actually in the other.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And so, but those moments, you can suddenly realize, hey, I don't hit it, but I look good when I'm hitting it.
Yes.
And so you decided to like, you know, move, or you hit it, and then the particle is moving, and then you generate some byproduct. And so that can be, you know, a springboard to another decision as well.
Totally.
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome.
Great.
If there aren't any other questions, I don't know. I think we can be
Yeah.
finished with our talk. But I think for those of us here, you're welcome to go into our gallery space and have fun. I'm sure I'll want to jump in there and play around today a little bit. But yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming this evening, and thanks for checking out our work.
Yeah.
We really appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you. Awesome.